Brought to you by WikiVidi.com. Battle of Prokhorovka. The Battle of Prokhorovka was fought on 12 July 1943 near Prokhorovka, southeast of Kursk, in the Soviet Union, during the Second World War. Taking place on the Eastern Front, the engagement was part of the wider Battle of Kursk, and occurred when the 5th Guards Tank Army of the Soviet Red Army attacked the 2nd SS Panzer Corps of the German Wehrmacht in one of the largest tank battles in military history. In April 1943, the German High Command began preparing for Operation Citadel, with the objective of enveloping and destroying the Soviet forces in the Kursk salient, by attacking and breaking through the base of the salient from north and south simultaneously. The German offensive was delayed several times due to the vacillation of the leadership, and the addition of more forces and new equipment. The Soviet High Command, Stavka, had learned of the German intentions, and therefore used the delay to prepare a series of defensive belts along the routes of the planned German offensive. The Soviet leadership also massed several armies deep behind their defenses as the Stavka Reserve. This army group, the Steppe Front, was to launch counter-offensives once the German strength had dissipated. The 5th Guards Tank Army was the primary armored formation of the Steppe Front. On 5 July 1943, the Wehrmacht launched its offensive on the northern side of the salient. The German forces bogged down within 4 days. On the southern side, the German 4th Panzer Army, with Army Detachment Kempf on its eastern flank, attacked the Soviet defenses of the Voronezh Front. They made slow, but steady progress through the Soviet defensive lines. After a week of fighting, the Soviets launched their counter-offensives, Operation Kutuzov in the northern side, and a coinciding one in the southern side. On the southern side of the salient near Prokhorovka, the 5th Guards Tank Army engaged the 2nd SS Panzer Corps of the 4th Panzer Army, resulting in a large clash of armor. The 5th Guards Tank Army suffered significant losses in the attack, but succeeded in preventing the Wehrmacht from capturing Prokhorovka, and breaking through the 3rd defensive belt, the last heavily fortified one. The German High Command, unable to accomplish its objective, cancelled Operation Citadel, and began redeploying its forces to deal with new pressing developments elsewhere. The Red Army went on a general offensive, conducting Operation Polkovodets Rumyantsev in the southern side, and continuing Operation Kutuzov in the northern side. The Soviet Union thus seized the strategic initiative on the Eastern Front, which it was to hold for the rest of the war. Background. After the conclusion of the battle for the Donets, as the spring Rasputitsa season came to an end in 1943, both the German and Soviet commands considered their plans for future operations. The Soviet Premier Joseph Stalin and some senior Soviet officers wanted to seize the initiative first and attack the German forces inside the Soviet Union. But they were convinced by a number of key commanders, including the Deputy Supreme Commander Georgy Zhukov, to assume a defensive posture instead. This would allow the German side to weaken themselves in attacking prepared positions, after which the Soviet forces would be able to respond with an offensive. Strategic discussions also occurred on the German side, with Field Marshal Erich von Manstein arguing for a mobile defense that would give up terrain and allow the Soviet units to advance, while the German forces launched a series of sharp counterattacks against their flanks to inflict heavy attrition. But, for political reasons, Adolf Hitler insisted that the German forces go on the offensive, choosing the Kursk salient for the attack. On 15 April 1943 he authorized preparations for Unternehmen Citadel. The German offensive plan envisioned an assault at the base of the Kursk salient from both the north and south, with the intent of enveloping and destroying the Soviet forces in the salient. The two spearheads were to meet near Kursk. From the south, the 48th Panzer Corps and General Paul Haus's 2nd SS Panzer Corps, forming the left and right wings of the 4th Panzer Army commanded by Colonel General Hermann Hoth, would drive northward. The 3rd Panzer Corps of Army Detachment Kempf was to protect Hoth's right flank. The 4th Panzer Army and Army Detachment Kempf were under Army Group South, commanded by Manstein. Air support over the southern portion of the offensive was provided by Colonel General Otto des Lok's Luftflotte 4 and its major air formation, the 8th Air Corps. The German offensive, originally slated to commence in the beginning of May, was postponed several times as the German leadership reconsidered and vacillated over its prospects, as well as to bring forward more units and equipment. The Soviet leadership, through their intelligence agencies and foreign sources, learned about the German intentions, and therefore the multiple delays by the German High Command allowed them a great deal of time to prepare their defenses. Employing defense in depth, they constructed a series of defensive lines to wear down the attacking panzer formations. 3 belts made up of extensive minefields, anti-tank ditches, and anti-tank gun emplacements were created, and behind those were an additional 3 belts, which were mostly unoccupied and less fortified. The Voronezh Front, commanded by General Nikolai Vatutin, defended the southern face of the salient. The Steppe Front, commanded by Colonel General Ivan Konev, formed the strategic reserve. It was to be held back east of the salient until the time was right for the Soviet counter-offensive. This formation included Lieutenant General Alexei Zhatov's 5th Guards Army, and Lieutenant General Pavel Rotmistrov's 5th Guard Tank Army. German advance leading up to Prokhorovka. The Wehrmacht launched its attack on the morning of 5 July 1943 and met heavy resistance. There were far more Soviet anti-tank guns, minefields, anti-tank ditches, and overall Soviet resistance than had been anticipated, making a breakthrough more difficult to achieve. Furthermore, from the outset they were subjected to frequent counterattacks from Soviet tank units. Despite this, by the end of 5 July the 2nd SS Panzer Corps had advanced through the 1st defensive belt in the southern side of the salient and reached the 2nd, although the plan was to breach the first 2 belts and reach the 3rd on the first day. Nonetheless, the Panzer Corps' penetration caused great concern among Soviet commanders, compelling Vatutin to commit almost all of Voronezh Front's operational reserves by the end of the first day. The 3rd Panzer Corps met with stiff resistance as well and had great difficulty creating and maintaining a bridgehead across the northern Donets River. They eventually succeeded by the morning of 6 July, but the delay in their advance kept them from protecting the east flank of the 2nd SS Panzer Corps. Late on 6 July, the 5th Guard Tank and the 5th Guards armies of the Steppe Front began moving up from their reserve position. The 5th Guards Tank Army covered the over 3 days, and arrived at the Prokhorovka area on the night of 9 July. And the 5th Guards Army's 33rd Guards Rifle Corps arrived at the settlement on the night of 10 July. Both armies completed their journey and deployment intact without any substantial interference from the Luftwaffe. Slow progress by the 48th Panzer Corps caused Hoth to shift elements of the 2nd SS Panzer Corps on 8 July to aid the 48th Panzer Corps drive toward Oboyan and Kursk. On the same day, the Soviet units counterattacked the 2nd SS Panzer Corps with several tank corps. These attacks did not destroy the 2nd SS Panzer Corps as hoped, but slowed its progress. By the end of 8 July, 2nd SS Panzer Corps had advanced about and broken through the 1st and 2nd defensive belts. On the following day, 9 July, a meeting of the commanders of the German forces on the northern side of the Kursk salient concluded that a breakthrough in the northern side of the salient was unlikely. Nevertheless, they decided to continue their offensive to maintain pressure and inflict casualties, thereby tying down the Soviet forces there. Any level of success for Operation Citadel now depended on a breakthrough being achieved by 4th Panzer Army and Army Detachment Kempf on the southern side of the Kursk salient. Thank you for watching, brought to you by WikiVidi.com. Please like and subscribe below. Please like and subscribe below.